Reading Group 1 for this module consists of 3 readings. Girl by Jamaica Kincaid, My Papa's Waltz by Theodore Rothke, and Everyday Use by Alice Walker. So I'm going to just give you some background information about each of the authors and some things to think about while you are reading them to prepare you for your assignments. So first up, we have Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. So a little bit of information about the author. Kincaid is a writer from Antigua. She was raised by a single mother until she was about 10 years old, and her mother then got remarried and very quickly had 2 more children, boys. And Kincaid has said that after that happened, the dynamic in her relationship with her mother experienced a tremendous shift. A few years later, at the age of 16, she was sent to the U.S. By her mother and stepfather to work in order to help support the family. Her mother was staying at home with her brothers, her stepfather was not working, and somebody needed to pay the bills. So they sent her to the U.S. to work as a nanny for a family in Westchester County, New York. The family that she worked for took her in. They loved her. She really felt like she was part of the family. They encouraged her to pursue school because that was something that she really had wanted to do. And she started by going to community college and then transferring to a college in New Hampshire. And while she was going to school, she discovered that she really loved writing and decided to pursue that as a career. Now, it's important to note that while her mother and stepfather sent her to the States to work and earn money to support the family back in Antigua, she was not having that. She did not send money back. And when she, in letters home to her mother, expressed that she was going to become a writer, that was met with a lot of discouragement. They didn't see writing as a viable career option. Her mother specifically expressed concern if she were to write anything that might reflect poorly on her family. So at 24, she changed her name from Elaine Richardson, her birth name, to Jamaica Kincaid. So that, in one respect, she was kind of protecting her family from anything that she may write, which is how she kind of framed it to them. However, she also has said that the name change was really important for her because then that way her family, her mother, stepfather, and brothers could not ride on her coattails if she became really successful, and they couldn't align themselves with her and take credit for who she had become. So the reading that I'm asking you to look at by Kincaid is named Girl, and it's a really unique piece because it is considered by some to be a short story, but others consider it to be a poem because it has this really unique stream of consciousness writing style. It was originally published in an issue of the New Yorker back in 1978 and has since gone on to be put into a collection of stories by Kincaid, as well as being included in virtually every single anthology that is used to teach literature at a college. It is an incredibly important story to look at. So while you're reading it, and even, you should start thinking about these things before you read to sort of set the stage so that you are bringing your frame of reference and your experiences to the table. Because as you know, certain lenses of critical theory require you to do that. But while you're reading Girl, I want you to think about relationship dynamics, specifically between parents and children. And you should think about this in general terms, like parents and children in general, but also think about your own relationship dynamic with your parents or your parental figures. When you're reading, pay attention to the printed text. This is a conversation. There is a shift in text from Roman to italics, the little slanty letters. That shift indicates a shift in speaker. So the Roman, sort of normal print is the mother speaking, and the italics are the daughter's words. So even if before you read, you take a quick glance at it and notice that difference, that should start to set the stage for you to see perhaps what the relationship dynamic is like between this mother and daughter. Some other things to keep in mind. There is a word used in this story that some of you may find offensive. It is not a swear word. However, I just like to put it out there that the intention is not to offend anyone. It is really reflective of the dynamic between parent and child in this particular piece. I think most of us have experienced conversations, arguments, what have you, with parents or parental figures where one party or the other party uses words that might not necessarily be the most appropriately chosen words. So there's that component to it. Also be aware that there's some other vocabulary in the story that you are probably not familiar with. Do not be afraid to look it up. That is really an important skill to develop when you're reading, so that you truly understand what it is you're reading. Some of the words you might be able to get from the context of the story, but some of them are very particular to Caribbean culture. And unless you are well versed in that, you will not know exactly what they refer to. So look it up. Do a quick Google search. They're all very easy to find. The second reading is the poem My Papa's Waltz by Theodore Roethke. Roethke was from Saginaw, Michigan. His father was a German immigrant who owned and operated a greenhouse with his brother, Ted's uncle. And his father had some issues with alcohol, which, at this point, first story Girl, talk about family dynamics, parent-child dynamics. This one's called My Papa's Waltz. Hint, hint, hint. Parent-child relationships. So Ted was much closer to his uncle than his own father, and really focused on that relationship much more so than his relationship with his alcoholic father. Unfortunately, when Ted was a young child, his father died quite suddenly, and then a very short time afterwards, his uncle died. And we know, from experience, from study, from, witnessing, that the loss of a parent has a tremendous effect on a child. Quite frankly, no matter what age a child is, when a parent is lost, whether you're a young child or you're an adult, it still has a tremendous impact. Ted himself suffered from a lot of mental health issues throughout his life, and mental health was not viewed as openly during his lifetime as it is today. There was a tremendous stigma associated with any type of mental health issue, and instead of seeking professional help, Ted frequently self-medicated with alcohol, sort of falling into the same patterns that his own father perhaps experienced. So the poem that I've asked you to read is My Papa's Waltz. And again, I want you to think about relationship dynamics between parents and children. Again, in terms of general relationship dynamics as well as your own. Another thing that is incredibly important to keep in mind while reading this poem, while analyzing this poem, is memory and how it is not 100% accurate. We like to think of our memory as being accurate. You know, when we remember an event or a place, there might be small things that we realize we don't remember 100% accurately, but we like to think that overall our memory is accurate. However, it's not the case. A really great example of this is to think about someplace you went as a child. Here in Western New York, lots of kids, lots of you may have gone to Fantasy Island, the amusement park, as a small child. When you go there as a little kid, you think that place is huge. You think it is just enormous and the rides are just fabulous and everything is just wonderful as a little kid. Then as you get older, and if you happen to go back, you realize that it's incredibly small for an amusement park, that the roller coaster isn't as, scary or, threatening as you remembered it being. When you get a little bit older and you get to go to a place like Darien Lake and you see those rides and the tremendous expanse of park, you realize that your memory of Fantasy Island is not accurate. And that's truly representative of our memory. We don't remember things accurately, and that's incredibly important to keep in mind when reading My Papa's Waltz or any other literature that may have an autobiographical influence, even Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. With the Rothke poem, just like with other literature, think about the language he chose. Think about the words he uses. No writer picks words at random. Words are chosen for very specific purposes. So when you're reading the poem, when you may listen to the poem, how do the words make you feel? Or how do the words he chose influence your interpretation of the poem? And I will add one extra little tidbit here for My Papa's Waltz. This is a really interesting poem because it can be viewed very clearly and supported from the text of the poem in two very different ways. So, word choice, as the reader, your frame of reference come together to determine how you interpret it. Do you take one path or do you take the other? Then the third reading that I'm asking you to do is a short story called Everyday Use by Alice Walker. And Alice Walker is an African-American writer. She was born in 1944 to sharecroppers in Georgia. She's probably most well known for being the author of The Color Purple, but between novels, short story collections, essays, poetry, etc., she's published about 40 books. She is the first African-American woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and she's won a whole slew of other awards. She was involved in the civil rights movement and the equal rights movement in the 1960s. For the equal rights movement, she was very specifically focused on equal rights for women of color. Unfortunately, some of her more recent activism and content has had her labeled as rather problematic. I will leave it at that. That does not come into play in terms of everyday use. However, we are all human. We are all very complicated creatures, and it's important to recognize that writers are also rather complicated creatures. We know from current events that artists, whether they be actors, musicians, writers, what have you, their actions don't necessarily always match the way we view them in public life. So everyday use, as I said, is a short story. Some things to think about, again, relationship dynamics. But in regards to everyday use, it's not just relationship dynamics between parent and child. It's relationship dynamics in families. And again, think about this both in very general terms, what society says relationship dynamics in families should be like, what you have seen family dynamics be like in different portrayals, as well as your own specific family dynamic. I also want you to think about the importance of a name, or maybe the lack of importance of a name. Think about your own name. Are you happy with the name that your parents gave you? What does it mean? Why were you named that? Is there significance to it? If you could choose any name for yourself, what would it be? Names are a really interesting aspect of us as people, especially when you consider parents pick names before they've actually even met their child or seen the type of person that the child will be. Another thing to keep in mind or to think about is the concept of heritage. What is heritage? What does it mean? Again, in very general terms, as well as for your own concept of heritage. Do you, as a member of your family, celebrate your heritage? How so? What does that mean? There's a lot of, immigrant culture in the United States. And as generations progress, some of that may get watered down, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there are certain aspects of it that remain very strong. One of those aspects may be family heirlooms. What is the concept of a family heirloom? Does your family have heirlooms? Things that get passed down from generation to generation. Are there things that that you will inherit and they belonged to your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents? Does that hold significance? Does that hold importance? Again, that's something that can remain very strong throughout a family, but it also can get watered down over time. I think about my own experience. I'm a first-generation American, and heritage is incredibly important to me. And family heirlooms, oh my gosh, family heirlooms. I have more family heirlooms than I know what to do with. And I look at them and I frequently wonder, what will happen to them when I am gone? Will my children appreciate them? If my children take them and appreciate them, will their children appreciate it? Where in the line does the meaning of a family heirloom change? So these are the 3 readings. I want you to really spend some time with them. I'm going to be giving you links to the texts. I will be giving you some supplemental materials to go with them. And then there will be some assignments. I really hope that you enjoy these readings. They are some of my favorites. Because I teach literature and am an avid reader, you will hear me say that for pretty much everything I assign, because words are just my thing. So enjoy.